So my first intuitive, I want to say, experiences when I was a kid. I was living in the countryside on Oahu in this really old house, and every time I would see this cat appear and disappear. And I would just point to it and yell, cat, cat, and then my mom would look at me very strange. And I never really thought about it until I got older, and then my mom brought it up and she said, why would you point and say cat every time when you lived in that house? And I said, because I would see a cat. And I said I would see it appearing and disappearing everywhere. And she was telling me that at the time, she said she didn't want to tell anybody, but she didn't feel comfortable in that house. She said it felt kind of spooky to her. And she said that she would find cat scratches all over the walls and on some of the doors and the closet. And so she thinks that maybe a cat, the family that lived there before had a cat. So I guess I was picking up on the energy of the cat that lived there, with the family. So that was my first experiences. Later on, I would have others where I would have family relatives visit and tell me that they're gonna go, and then they passed on. So I would have visions like that, and sometimes dreams, and sometimes just weird random things for the day, like we're gonna see a car accident, then we saw a car accident, like that kind of stuff. And then as I got older, I want to say like maybe 5 or 6, I used to take karate, and I just wanted to take it because my other siblings were taking it. But then when I started to take karate, what happened was I would hear this voice in my head, and they were telling me, or this man was telling me how to do the form correctly. So even if I was being taught the form, what we say is kata. So when I was doing the kata, I would hear this voice in my head saying, no, your foot has to be positioned here, your weight has to be shifted on this foot, you have to be facing a certain way. And they would be telling me these things, so I would just listen. And I thought, at the time, I thought it was normal, and I thought that everybody could hear that voice telling them how to do it, and I thought, maybe they just didn't want to listen to it, or they didn't pay attention to it. But I would listen to it, and I would pay attention to it, and I would try to do it as perfect as I could, which kind of made me want to do things perfect, which is not always that great either, because we have to understand that no one's perfect, right? And I'm trying to do these forms at 6 years old, and he's telling me how to do them, how to breathe a certain way, and so I'm listening to him. And then my sensei at the time, he would always turn around and he would use me as an example, and I used to get so embarrassed. He'd be like, follow that girl, she's doing everything right, and what are you guys doing? And I was like, oh my god. So then I kind of was like, I didn't want to do it correctly because I felt like everyone would be mad at me. so then I try not to pay attention to the voice as much. But it's weird because I would hear that all the time, and I really had this closeness with that voice, and like they would tell me how to punch, how to hit things, it was really, really strange, but I followed it, and then my heart opened up, and I really loved doing martial arts. And then I guess as you get older, you stop doing that kind of stuff, and you're like, you're going to high school. So I stopped doing martial arts, and then I went into high school, and I had friends that sometimes it was really hard for me to make friends. Actually, I would hop around from friends to friends because it was really hard to understand them, because they would say something, but I would feel something else. So they would say, yeah, let's go do this, and I would feel like they really didn't want to. Or some of them were going through some really tough times with family, and so I could tell that they were using that in their life to harm themselves in some way. And sometimes they also were very manipulating to me. So it was really hard to find people that were very true to themselves. But then, now that I'm older, I'm realizing that, yeah, not everybody is going to be that way, because we all have this filter, and we all have this thing where, like, sometimes we want to tell little white lies because we also want to make the other person feel happy and special too. But at that time, I never understood that. So I was really disappointed in the world, and I was in a very sad place, and it was really hard for me to make friends. But then as I got older and I met my husband, we were dating, and we were getting back into martial arts and healing, and all the spiritual world opened up for us, like Reiki and Wing Chun and Bakwa and all these things that was so exciting and such a new world for me, and even Tai Chi. And so when we got into those things, like I started meditating more, and I started getting more into the spiritual realm, started embracing what I had versus feeling like, the world was so sad and depressing. And the way I got into cards was one of my friends, he brought this tarot deck to me, and he says, "Did you ever do readings?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, ask a question." So I honestly, I don't remember the question today. This was like over 20 something years ago. But I remember though that I did ask a question, and then he flipped 3 cards, and he goes, "You know your answer, right?" And I'm looking at the cards laid out, and I'm like, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I do know the answer." I said, "From looking at these cards, it doesn't look good." And he's like, "Yeah, so don't make that choice." And I'm like, "Yeah." And then he goes, "Here, you can have them." And then he gave me the cards, and I was like, so he must have known something that I didn't know, right? So I started using the cards, and then I started doing readings that way, and then people started coming back, and so it was really interesting. But that was my class, I guess, and that's why I really cherish like how you feel emotionally and what you pick up internally versus trying to just study or memorize a card, because you are coming from a different space and you are really getting in touch with how you feel about something versus looking at something and looking up how you feel. so that's what really got me into tarot cards. And so then I started doing tarot cards for a really long time. And then there's these layers that I was going through with tarot cards. And I think this is good to share because maybe you guys go through these layers. Who knows? Maybe some people go through this whole thing where they just get everything one time. But for me, it started off with visual. So I would look at the tarot deck and I would see I would see it moving. Like, it was weird. It was like I would stare at it. Like how you stare at something and you go into like this zone. I would just stare at the picture on the card, and I could see the card moving, and I could imagine the people on the card or the whatever it is on the card, the birds, whatever, talking to me, and what they would say, and I was getting my answers like that, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. So I started doing readings more, and then it went away. It's almost like the pipe turned off. The water was running, and then the pipe turned off, and then I'm like, hey, where did you guys go? How am I going to do readings now? Like it just went away, and I'm like, oh, what does that mean? So then I started doing readings again, and then it changed, and then it was more like hearing things. So then I started hearing things more. The visual thing was still there, but not as strong, and then the hearing thing was coming stronger. So I started hearing a little bit more, and then that went away. And then I was like, okay, that's really strange. And then this feeling thing started coming in. So then I started picking up on feelings and emotions, and then the other stuff was still there, but they were not as strong anymore. And then I was just picking up on the feelings more, and how someone felt like, and the sadness or the happiness or the being excited about something. So then those started coming into play. And then later, I guess through my experience, I realized that I was also holding back on what I was saying. So I started doing this thing where I would talk fast and make sure that I'm not filtering out too much. And then I think that's when the channeling started to come into play. So I said, oh, okay, let me start doing this. So I would close my eyes and I would like let something come through me, and I would speak through it, and then I would become it, you know, like Kuan Yin. Or sometimes I would have this mala bead in my hand and I would be like rocking back and forth, and I would have this weird Chinese accent, and I'm not Chinese, by the way, but and then I would be doing this because I'm thinking I have a mala bead in my hand, but I really don't. And then I started doing readings that way, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then that stopped. And then from there, it just made me realize that they were introducing me to different ways of picking up messages. And there's no right or wrong way. There's so many different ways, and we each will find our own. We'll each either will find our own that we like, or they will find us. So it's really interesting. And I feel like sometimes when you go through that period where what happened to it just stopped, you just got to kind of relax and let this energy come through so that you're able to get to the next step. Because sometimes if you try to do something somebody else's way, it's not going to work for you. And like I remember I used to do these psychic fairs, and there would be like these other psychics around me, and they would be talking about tarot cards, and they would be saying stuff about like, oh yeah, when you combine the Tower card with this card, it means this, and when you combine these three cards, and then some people were into numerology, and I was like, wow, I don't have this knowledge, I don't know these things. I tried to get into that way of doing readings, so I would memorize the cards, I would study the numerology, and it was good because I had some type of foundation, which I think is always good to have, because that also will combine with what you already know. But for me to try and just do it another person's way, it wasn't working for me, and I had to embrace what I naturally was doing. So in a sense, it's like you're gonna find your way and how you receive your messages, and there's no right or wrong. There's people really good at what they do in so many different ways. Like there's some people that scry with water in a bowl, and there's some people that actually do scry with a crystal ball still yet. And I remember seeing a lady once where she would light a cigarette and she would blow the smoke and she would give a reading off of the smoke. And it's really interesting to just explore and try different things and see what you like. I also was learning from one of my friends how to do pulse diagnosis, and then I was like, oh, I wonder if I can like tap into the pulse and then pick up the frequency from the pulse, and also get a whole specific reading on just doing that. And I was even playing around with that for a while. Yeah, just different things, but it's always good to just try, because you're opening up all different aspects of your intuition. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and comment below and let me know what ways that you get your messages.